and a good morning to all of you. Your chattering magpie is here at last to bid adieu to Persuasion. Today is the very last read along of this amazing little book by the unparalleled queen of rom-com. Okay, Jane Austen may not have been the one that wrote the first rom-com, though but I want to think that she did. She is just a classic for a reason. So yeah, I've had so much fun reading Persuasion, and I hope that you also had a blast. And now today it is time for us to hopefully see that people finally come to a decision and people stop dilly-dallying. Life is short. Wentworth, come on, move your butt. Don't leave it all to Anne. Sometimes you gotta be brave. Sometimes you gotta step up and do the thing, even though people might think that I don't know. I guess he still has to get used to the fact that he was jilted once. So that, I'm sure, takes a brunt on a man's ego, or anybody's ego, not just a man. Anybody would be like a little bit hesitant. So I have to give him at least a little bit of a pass there. Anyway, so we have Anne, Wentworth, Mr. Elliot, Mrs. Clay. We finished the last chapter with Anne confronting Mrs. Clay about her having been seen with Mr. Elliot. I wonder what that was all about. So we're gonna get some answers today. We will get all the answers, you guys. Don't you worry. I will not leave you in suspense. So if this is your first time joining here, yes, Red Tempest is doing the count. Poor Anne. Thank you. Keep counting. I was hoping that towards the end of the book I would stop having to say it, but she still needs a bit of a break now. All right, but before we start reading, let me just say hello to Early Gang, and look at you, Little Butterfly. You're the very first one on the chat. Little Butterfly says, so we have come to the end of something truly great. Persuasion is a book that one does not have to persuade me to read over and over again. I am so glad that you think the same as I do. It is a beautiful little book, very introspective, very beautiful. You can tell that a lot of wisdom from a long life and probably a long and lonely life is found within these pages. Let's remember that Jane Austen wrote this book towards the end of her life. She had been very sick. I think we can see a little bit of her in Mrs. Smith had been extremely sick, but she still retained that zest for living. She was not, like downtrodden and dispirited. So I think that's a self-insert there. So during this book, we get a little glimpse as to what she probably felt during that time. Jane Austen had her chance to marry. She also fell in love once, but that fell through. If you haven't watched the movie with Anne Hathaway called Becoming Jane, you should check it out. It's absolutely heartbreaking, but not as heartbreaking as Miss Austen Regrets. Oh, that one. Oh my gosh, I watched that one. I wanted to die crying. It was so sad. But Becoming Jane is beautiful, poignant, and also sad. So if you, like me, enjoy some sadness, some angstiness, beauty and stuff like that, then watch those. I recommend it. All right, so yeah, a lot of words to just acknowledge Little Butterfly's comment. I just agree with her comment. It's a very, very good book. Akihana, hello, darling. You have been absolutely busy this time. I know that right now it's super late for you, so you probably are going to be able to join us for the live, but I hope you enjoy the rewatch and pop in if you can into the watch party this afternoon. says, on that note, I look forward to seeing Wentworth finally make his move and kick Mr. Elliot to the curb. You and me both, girl. You and me both. I hope it's to your satisfaction. And then we have Teal. Teal says, persuasion. It's been short, sweet, snarky, and remarkable to the point for a Victorian novel. Looking forward to the conclusion and no more poor Anne. That's right, no more poor Anne. Noodles, dumplings, kimchi is here as well. And happy to see you here, as well as Cat Asterisk. Hello, happy to see you as well. And Red Tempest, of course, is here in the house, keeping track of all the poor Annes. Okay. So, to this week, or actually yesterday, and the day before, we had a few additions to the channel. We have now exceeded 150 subscribers. Huzzah! Hooray! We might be joined by a few more people in the next read-along. We are going to be doing another read-along. Starting on Friday, we will start reading A World Away. But for now, if there's somebody here who's listening and who doesn't know anything about persuasion, I'm just going to do like this brief rundown, this TLDR version, so that you can kind of not be lost and you can still join us. So, help me out, everybody. Anne Elliot, the daughter of a baronet. When she was 19, she met and fell in love with a young naval officer who had no fortune, and he had many prospects, but it was during time of war. He did not have money, he did not have rank, so she was persuaded by her friend Lady Russell to give him up. And she did, because she believed that it was better for him to go and seek his fortune without being attached to her. So she did it for unselfish reasons too. But he remained angry. Time passed, the war ended, he returns kind of like a war hero, or if not, at least a very, very rich young man. And he is ready to get married. Now, here's the thing. How the tables turn, you guys. How the tables have turned, because now Anne's family is impoverished. They're in debt. And they have to move out of their country house where they live in excessive luxury and go into the city. And meanwhile, they rent out the house. And who rents the house? No, not Wentworth, but Wentworth's sister and her husband. Anne, since she remains in the neighborhood after she moves out, she happens to bump into him. He's still angry. She's still like, being like miserable, knowing that she has lost his love and still loving him. She still has a thing for him. Anyway, Wentworth spends his entire autumn flirting with the local girls. Causes an accident. He came dangerously close to having to marry one of the girls he flirted around with. But all's well that ends well. The girl that had the accident ended up getting engaged to another man, so he's free. Meanwhile, Anne, she left the town. She is now in Bath with her family in the city, where she meets a lot of people, lots of new people, including a young man that's related to her, but let's not think about that too long. Let's not dwell on that too long. A young man called Mr. Elliot, who seems to truly, truly admire her, because Anne does have many virtues. She's also very pretty, in a soft, gentle kind of way. And everybody in town thinks that they too are going to get married. Everybody wants them to get married. It would be beneficial. He's going to inherit her father's title when her father dies. So it's just something that everybody wants, except Anne. Anne doesn't trust him. And she has a friend called Mrs. Smith, who tells her, I know this dude, he's bad news. He did this and this and this to me. Basically, he's a very bad person. So Anne now has that knowledge that the guy that's supposedly going after her is a bad guy. But there's also something very crucial to know. Wentworth is now in town. Yes, the guy that she dumped 8 years ago and who seemed absolutely angry with her and uninterested in pursuing the relationship again. Yeah, he's back and he is jealous of her and Mr. Elliot. So she's like trying to clear up the misunderstanding And it's just not happening, you guys. So that's where we're at. This is the last part of the book. Will Anne and Wentworth finally put their silly heads together and clear up this misunderstanding? Or will Anne and Wentworth be doomed to eternal solitude apart? I don't know. What do you guys think? Okay, that was a very long TLDR. I went 3 minutes over, but I hope I have covered most of the important points, right? Right. I see Red Tempest is being very poetic. Says, end? No, the journey doesn't end here. Finishing a book is just another path, one that we all must take. The gray ray curtain on this book rolls back and all turns to silver glass, and then you see it, white shores and beyond, a far green country under a swift sunrise with another book in hand. Wow! Red Tempest! I didn't know you had that in you. Either you are a poet and a romance writer at heart, or you just put in a really good prompt in ChatGPT. Fess up now. Alright, but you do have a point. There are always misunderstandings in romance, and I mean, aren't there always? That's a game. Romance and love can have often been described as a game. The will they, won't they is so fun, of course. All right, everybody, I do believe it is now time for us to finally get started. We're going to be reading the last 3 chapters of this book. We're going to be starting with chapter 23. Yes, let's do it. Chapter 23, everybody. All right. One day only had passed since Anne's conversation with Mrs. Smith, but a keener interest had succeeded, and she was now so little touched by Mr. Elliot's conduct, except... Hold on a second, did I get the wrong chapter? Hold on a sec. Oh yes, it is the right chapter. Sorry about that. One day only had passed since Anne's conversation with Mrs. Smith, but a keener interest had succeeded, and she was now so little touched by Mr. Elliot's conduct, except by its effects in one quarter, that it became a matter of course the next morning still to defer her explanatory visit in River Street. She had promised, that is, to go... she's putting off going to Lady Russell's to tell her all the truth, because there's still a lot of stuff up in the air that she wants to get to the bottom of. She had promised to be with the Musgroves from breakfast to dinner. Her faith was plighted, and Mr. Elliot's character, like the Sultaness Scheherazade's head, must live another day. She could not keep her appointment punctually, however. The weather was unfavorable, and she had grieved over the rain on her friend's account, and felt it very much on her own. Before she was able to attempt the walk, before she was able to attempt the walk, when she reached the White Hart and made her way to the proper apartment, she found herself neither arriving quite in time nor the first to arrive. The party before her were Mrs. Musgrove talking to Mrs. Croft, and Captain Harville to Captain Wentworth, and she immediately heard that Mary and Henrietta, too impatient to wait, had gone out the moment it had cleared, but would be back again soon, and that the strictest injunctions had been left with Mrs. Musgrove to keep her there till they returned. She had only to submit, sit down, be outwardly composed, and feel herself plunged all at once in all the agitations which she merely laid her account of tasting a little before the morning closed. There was no delay, no waste of time. She was deep in the happiness of such misery, or the misery of such happiness, instantly. 2 minutes after her entering the room, Captain Wentworth said, "We will write the letter we were talking of, Harville, now, if you give me the materials." Materials were all at hand, on a separate table. He went to it, and nearly turning his back on them all, was engrossed by writing. Mrs. Musgrove was giving Mrs. Croft the history of her eldest daughter's engagement, and just in that inconvenient tone of voice which was perfectly audible, while it pretended to be a whisper. Anne felt that she did not belong to the conversation, and yet as Captain Harville seemed thoughtful and not disposed to talk, she could not avoid hearing many undesirable particulars, such as how Mr. Musgrove and my brother Hayter had met again and again to talk it over, what my brother Hayter had said one day, and what Mr. Musgrove had proposed the next, and what had occurred to my sister Hayter, and what the young people had wished, and what I said at first I never could consent to, but was afterwards persuaded to think might do very well, and a great deal in the same style of open-hearted communication, minutiae which, even in every advantage of taste and delicacy, which good Mrs. Musgrove could not give, could be properly interesting only to the principals. Mrs. Croft was attending with great good humour, and whenever she spoke at all, it was very sensibly. Anne hoped the gentlemen might each be too self-occupied to hear. "And so, ma'am, all these things considered," said Mrs. Musgrove in her powerful whisper, "though we could have wished it different, yet altogether we did not think it fair to stand out any longer, for Charles Hayter was quite wild about it, and Henrietta was pretty near as bad, and so we thought they had better marry at once and make the best of it, as many others have done before them. At any rate, said I, it will be better than a long engagement." "That is precisely what I was going to observe," cried Mrs. Croft. "I would rather have young people settle on a small income at once, and have to struggle with a few difficulties together, than be involved in a long engagement. I always think that no mutual—" "Oh, dear Mrs. Croft!" cried Mrs. Musgrove, unable to let her finish her speech. "There is nothing I so abominate for young people as a long engagement. It is what I always protested against for my children. It is all very well, I used to say, for young people to be engaged if there is a certainty of their being able to marry in 6 months, or even 12. But a long engagement—" "Yes, dear ma'am," said Mrs. Croft, "or an uncertain engagement, an engagement which may be long. To begin without knowing that at such a time there will be the means of marrying, I hold to be very unsafe and unwise, and what I think all parents should prevent as far as they can." Anne found an unexpected interest here. She felt its application to herself, felt it in a nervous thrill all over her. Oh, because Mrs. Croft is of the same idea. Like, if probably Mrs. Croft doesn't know about Anne's and Wentworth's engagement, but if she had, she probably would have been against it. Just as she's saying, like, it would have been unwise. Anne, she felt its application to herself, felt it in a nervous thrill all over her, and at the same moment that her eyes instinctively glanced towards the distant table, Captain Wentworth's pen ceased to move. His head was raised, pausing, listening, and he turned around the next instant to give a look, one quick, conscious look at her. The two ladies continued to talk, to re-urge the same admitted truths and enforce them with such examples of the ill effect of a contrary practice as had fallen within their observation, but Anne heard nothing distinctly. It was only a buzz of words in her ear. Her mind was in confusion. Captain Harville, who had in truth been hearing none of it, now left his seat and moved to a window, and Anne, seeming to watch him, thought it was from thorough absence of mind. No, and Anne, seeming to watch him, though it was from a thorough absence of mind, became gradually sensible that he was inviting her to join him where he stood. He looked at her with a smile and a little motion of the head which expressed, "Come to me, I have something to say," and the unaffected, easy kindness of manner, which denoted the feelings of an older acquaintance than he really was, strongly enforced the invitation. She roused herself and went to him. The window at which he stood was at the other end of the room from where the two ladies were sitting, and though nearer to Captain Wentworth's table, not very near. As she joined him, Captain Harville's countenance reassumed a serious, thoughtful expression, which seemed its natural character. "Look here," said he, unfolding a parcel in his hand and displaying a small miniature painting. "Do you know who that is?" "Certainly. Captain Benwick." "Yes, and you may guess who it is for, but it was not done for her, Miss Elliot. Do you remember our walking together at Lyme, and me grieving for him? I little thought then, but no matter. This was drawn at the Cape. He met with a very clever young German artist at the Cape, and in compliance with a promise to my poor sister, sat to him, and was bringing it home for her, and I have now the charge of getting it properly set for another. It was a commission to me, but who else was there to employ? I hope I can allow for him. I am not sorry indeed to make it over to another. He undertakes it." Looking towards Captain Wentworth, "He is writing about it now." And with a quivering lip, he wound up the whole by saying, "Poor Fanny! She would not have forgotten him so soon." "No," replied Anne, in a low, feeling voice. "That I can easily believe." "It was not in her nature. She doted on him." "It would not be in the nature of any woman who truly loved." Captain Harville smiled, as much as to say, "Do you claim that for your sex?" And she answered the question, smiling also. "Yes, we certainly do not forget you so soon as you forget us. It is perfect. It is perhaps our fate rather than our merit. We cannot help ourselves. We live at home, quiet, confined, and our feelings prey upon us. You are forced on exertion. You have always a profession, pursuits, business of some kind or other, to take you back into the world immediately. And continual occupation and change soon weaken impressions." "Granting your assertion that the world does all this so soon for men, which, however, I do not think I shall grant, it does not apply to Benwick. He has not been forced upon any exertion. The peace turned him on shore at the very moment. He has been living with us in our little family circle ever since." "True, very true. I do not recollect, but what shall we say now, Captain Harville? If the change be not from outward circumstances, it must be from within. It must be nature, man's nature, which has done the business for Captain Benwick."
"No, no, it is not man's nature. I will not allow it to be more man's nature than woman's to be inconstant and forget those they do love, or have loved. I believe the reverse. I believe in a true analogy between our bodily frames and our mental."
"Oh, Captain Harville, I was beginning to like you, but—"
"And that as our bodies are the strongest, so are our feelings, capable of bearing most rough usage and riding out the heaviest weather."
"Your feelings may be the strongest," replied Anne, "but the same spirit of analogy will authorize me to assert that ours are the most tender. Man is more robust than woman, but he is not longer lived, which exactly explains my view of the nature of their attachments. Nay, it would be too hard upon you if it were otherwise. You have difficulties and privations, and dangers enough to struggle with. You're always laboring and toiling, exposed to every risk and hardship. Your home, country, friends all quitted. Neither time, nor health, nor life to be called your own. It would be too hard indeed if a woman's feelings were to be added to all this."
"We shall never agree upon this question," Captain Harville was beginning to say, when a slight noise called their attention to Captain Wentworth's hitherto perfectly quiet division of the room.
There was nothing more than his pen had fallen down, but Anne was startled at finding him nearer than she supposed, and half inclined to suspect that the pen had only fallen because he had been occupied by them, striving to catch sounds, which yet she did not think he could have caught.
"Have you finished your letter?" said Captain Harville. "Not quite. A few lines more. I shall be done in 5 minutes." "There is no hurry on my side. I am only ready whenever you are. I am in very good anchorage here," he said, smiling at Anne. "Well supplied and want for nothing. No hurry for a signal at all." Well, Miss Elliot, he lowered his voice, as I was saying, we shall never agree, I suppose, upon this point. No man and woman would probably. But let me observe that all histories are against you, all stories, prose, and verse. If I had such a memory as Benwick, I could bring you 50 quotations in a moment on my side of the argument. And I do not think I ever opened a book in my life which had not something to say upon woman's inconstancy. Songs and proverbs all talk of woman's fickleness. But perhaps you will say they were all written by men.
Perhaps I shall. Yes, yes, if you please, no reference to examples in books. Men have had every advantage of us in telling their own story. Education has been theirs in so much higher a degree. The pen has been in their hands. I will not allow books to prove anything.
But how shall we prove anything?
We never shall. We never can expect to prove anything upon such a point. It is a difference of opinion which does not admit of proof. We each begin, probably, with a little bias towards our own sex, and upon that bias build every circumstance in favor of it which has occurred within our own circle, many of which circumstances, perhaps those very cases which strike us the most, may be precisely such as cannot be brought forward without betraying a confidence, or in some respect saying what should not be said.
Ah, cried Captain Carville in a tone of strong feeling, if I could but make you comprehend what a man suffers when he takes a last look at his wife and children, and watches the boat that he has sent them off in, as long as it is in sight, and then turns away and says, God knows whether we meet again. And then, if I could convey to you the glow of his soul when he does see them again, when coming back after a 12-month's absence perhaps, and obliged to put into another port, he calculates how soon it be possible to get them there, pretending to deceive himself and saying, they cannot be here till such a day, but all the while hoping for them 12 hours sooner, and seeing them arrive at last as if heaven had given them wings, by many hours sooner still. If I could explain to you all this, and all that a man can bear and do, what glories to do for the sake of these treasures of his existence. I speak, you know, only of such men as have hearts, he said, pressing his own with emotion.
Oh, cried Anne eagerly, I hope I do justice to all that is felt by you and by those who resemble you. God forbid that I should undervalue the warm and faithful feelings of any of my fellow creatures. I should deserve utter contempt if I dared to suppose that your attachment and constancy were known only by women. No, I believe you capable of everything great and good in your married lives. I believe you equal to every important exertion and to every domestic forbearance, so long as, if I may be allowed the expression, so long as you have an object. I mean, while the woman you love lives, and lives for you. All the privilege I claim for my own sex, and it is not a very enviable one, you need not covet it, is that of loving longest, when existence or when hope is gone. Oh, poor Anne. She could not immediately have uttered another sentence. Her heart was too full, her breath too much oppressed.
You are a good soul, cried Captain Harville, putting his hand on her arm quite affectionately. There is no quarrelling with you. And when I think of Benwick, my tongue is tied.
Their attention was called toward the others. Mrs. Croft was taking her leave. Here, Frederick, you and I part company, I believe, said she. I am going home, and you have an engagement with your friend. Tonight we may have the pleasure of all meeting again at your party, she said, turning to Anne. We had your sister's card yesterday, and I understood Frederick had a card too, though I did not see it. And you are disengaged, Frederick, are you not, as well as yourselves? Captain Wentworth was folding up a letter in great haste, and either could not or would not answer fully.
Yes, said he, very true, here we separate. Harville and I shall soon be after you. That is Harville, if you're ready. I am in half a minute. I know you will not be sorry to be off. I shall be at your service in half a minute.
Mrs. Croft left them, and Captain Wentworth, having sealed his letter with great rapidity, was indeed ready, and had even a hurried, agitated air, which showed impatience to be gone. Anne knew not how to understand it. She had the kindest "Good morning, God bless you," from Captain Harville, but from him not a word, not a look. He had passed out of the room without a look. She had only time, however, to move closer to the table where he had been writing, when footsteps were heard returning. The door opened. It was himself. He begged her pardon, but he had forgotten his gloves, and instantly crossing the room to the writing table, and standing with his back toward Mrs. Musgrove, he drew out a letter from under the scattered paper, and placed it before Anne, with eyes of glowing entreaty fixed on her for a time, and hastily collecting his gloves, was again out of the room, almost before Mrs. Musgrove was aware of his being in it, the work of an instant.
Ooh. There's a letter for Anne. What do you guys think of the little debate that Anne and Captain Harville had? You guys don't have to agree or disagree. If they were not able to come to a consensus, it's a question that's all this time.
But anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Now, continuing on. The revolution which one instant had made in Anne was almost beyond expression. The letter, with a direction hardly legible, to Miss A. E., was evidently the one which he had been folding so hastily. While supposing to be writing only to Captain Benwick, he had been also addressing her. On the contents of that letter depended all which this world could do for her. Anything was possible, anything might be defied rather than suspense. Mrs. Musgrove had little arrangements of her own at her own table, to the protection she must trust, and sinking into the chair which he had occupied, succeeding to the very spot where he had leaned and written, her eyes devoured the following words: "I can listen no longer in silence. I must speak to you by such means as within my reach. You pierce my soul. I am half agony, half hope. Tell me not that I am too late, that such precious feelings are gone forever. I offer myself to you again, with a heart even more your own than when you almost broke it 8 years and a half ago. Dare not say that man forgets sooner than woman, that his love has an earlier death. I have loved none but you. Unjust I may have been, weak and resentful I have been, but never inconstant. You alone have brought me to Bath. For you alone I think and plan. Have you not seen this? Can you fail to have understood my wishes? I had not waited even these 10 days, could I have read your feelings, and think you must have penetrated mine. I can hardly write. I am every instant hearing something which overpowers me. You sink your voice, but I can distinguish the tones of that voice when they would be lost on others. Too good, too excellent creature, you do us justice indeed. You do believe that there is true attachment and constancy among men. Believe it to be most fervent, most undeviating, and F.W. I must go, uncertain of my fate, but I shall return hither, or follow your party, as soon as possible. A word, a look, will be enough to decide whether I enter your father's house this evening or never. Such a letter was not to be soon recovered from. Half an hour's solitude and reflection might have tranquilized her. The 10 minutes only which now passed before she was interrupted, with all the restraints of her situation, could do nothing towards tranquillity. Every moment rather brought fresh agitation. It was an overpowering happiness, and before she was beyond the first stage of full sensation, Charles, Mary, and Henrietta all came in. The absolute necessity of seeming like herself produced then an immediate struggle, but after a while she could do no more. She began not to understand a word they said, and was obliged to plead indisposition and excuse herself. She could then see that she looked very ill. No, they could then see that she looked very ill, were shocked and concerned, and would not stir without her for the world. This was dreadful. Would they have only gone away and left her in the quiet possession of that room, it would have been her cure. But to have them all standing or waiting around her was distracting, and in desperation she said she would go home. "By all means, my dear," cried Mrs. Musgrove, "go home directly and take care of yourself, that you may be fit for the evening. I wish Sarah was here to doctor you, but I am no doctor myself. Charles, ring and order a chair. She must not walk." But the chair would never do. Worse than all, to lose the possibility of speaking 2 words to Captain Wentworth in the course of her quiet, solitary progress up the town, she felt almost certain of meeting him, could not be borne. The chair was earnestly protested against, and Mrs. Musgrove, who thought only of one sort of illness, having assured herself with some anxiety that there had been no fall in the case, had Anne not at that Anne had not at any time lately slipped down and got a blow on her head, that she was perfectly convinced of having had no fall, could part with her cheerfully and depend on finding her better at night. Anxious to omit no possible precaution, Anne struggled and said, "I'm afraid, ma'am, that it is not perfectly understood. Pray be so good as to mention to the other gentlemen that we hope to see your whole party this evening. I'm afraid there has been some mistake, and I wish you particularly to assure Captain Harville and Captain Wentworth that we hope to see them both." "Oh, my dear, it is quite understood. I give you my word. Captain Harville has no thought of but going." "Do you think so? But I am afraid, and I should be so sorry. Will you promise me to mention it when you see them again? You will see them both again this morning, I dare say. Do promise me." "To be sure I will, if you wish it. Charles, if you see Captain Harville anywhere, remember to give Miss Anne's this message. But indeed, my dear, you need not be uneasy. Captain Harville holds himself quite engaged, I'll answer for it, and Captain Wentworth the same, I dare say." Anne could do no more, but her heart prophesied some mischance to damp the perfection of her felicity. It could not be very lasting, however. Even if he did not come to Camden Place himself, it would be in her power to send an intelligible sentence by Captain Harville. Another momentary vexation occurred. Charles, in his real concern and good nature, would go home with her. There was no preventing him. This was almost cruel. She could not be long ungrateful. He was sacrificing an engagement at a gunsmith's to be of use to her, and she set off with him, with no feeling but gratitude apparent. Oh, Anne! Poor Anne. She's like trying to get rid of everybody to go and chase down Wentworth to tell him, "Yes, my dude, I got your letter. Please come to my father's house tonight." And everybody like, "Here, let's have somebody take you home." "No, you don't want to. You don't want. You want to walk home? Okay, fine." Then Charles is like, "I'll walk you home," and she's like, "Oh." Anne is suffering. But it's okay, Anne. It's okay. Just put up with it a little bit longer. I mean, the fact that Charles is willing to not go and see a gunsmith at the moment. Charles loves hunting, and he loves nothing more than guns and shooting and whatnot. That's his hobby. So the fact that he actually put off going to see the gun for the sake of walking Anne, that's actually really decent of him. Too bad, though, that that's the last thing that Anne wanted. But she has to pretend that she's absolutely gratitude. They're delightful. They were in Union Street when a quicker step behind, a something of a familiar sound, gave her 2 moments' preparation for the sight of Captain Wentworth. He joined them, but, as if irresolute whether to join or to pass on, said nothing, only looked. Anne could command herself enough to receive that look, and not repulsively. The cheeks which had been pale now glowed, and the movements which had hesitated were decided. He walked by her side. Presently struck by a sudden thought, Charles said, "Captain Wentworth, which way are you going? Only to Gay Street or further up the town?"
I hardly know, replied Captain Wentworth, surprised. Are you going as high as Belmont? Are you going near Camden Place? Because if you are, I shall have no scruple in asking you to take my place and give Anne your arm to her father's door. She is rather done for this morning and must not go so far without help, and I ought to be at that fellow's in the market-place. He promised me the sight of a capital gun he's just going to send off. Said he would keep it unpacked to the last possible moment that I might see it, and if I do not turn back now, I have no chance. A description a good deal like the second-sized double barrel of mine, which you shot with one day round Winthrop. There could not be an objection. There could only be a most proper alacrity, a most obliging compliance for public view, and smiles reigned in, and spirits dancing in private rapture. In half a minute, Charles was at the bottom of Union Street again, and the other two proceeding together, and soon words enough had passed between them to decide the direction toward the comparatively quiet and retired gravel walk, where the power of conversation would make the present hour a blessing indeed, and prepared for all the immortality which the happiest recollections of their own future lives could bestow. There they exchanged again those feelings and those promises which had once before seemed to secure everything, but which had been followed by so many, many years of division and estrangement. There they reunited again into the past, more exquisitely happy perhaps in their reunion than when it had been first projected, more tender, more tried, more fixed in the knowledge of each other's character, truth, and attachment, more equal to act, more justified in acting. And there, as they slowly paced the gradual ascent, heedless of every group around them, seeing neither sauntering politicians, bustling housekeepers, flirting girls, nor nursery maids and children, they could indulge in those retrospections and acknowledgments, and especially in those explanations of what had directly preceded the present moment, which were so poignant and so ceaseless in interest. All the little variations of the last week were gone through, and of yesterday and today there could scarcely be an end. She had not mistaken him. Jealousy of Mr. Elliot had been the retarding weight, the doubt, the torment. That had begun to operate in the very hour of first meeting her in Bath. That had returned after a short suspension to ruin the concert. And that had influenced him in everything he had said and done, or omitted to say and do, in the last 24 hours. It had been gradually yielding to the better hopes with her looks, or words, or actions occasionally encouraged. It had been vanquished at last by those sentiments and those tones which had reached him while she talked with Captain Harville, and under the irresistible governance of which he had seized a sheet of paper and poured out his feelings. Of what he had then written, nothing was to be retracted or qualified. He persisted in having loved none but her. She had never been supplanted. He never even believed himself to see her equal. Thus much indeed he was obliged to acknowledge, that he had been constant and unconsciously, nay, unintentionally, that he had meant to forget her, and believed it to be done. He had imagined himself indifferent, when he had only been angry, and he had been unjust to her merits because he had been a sufferer from them. Her character was now fixed on his mind as perfection itself, maintaining the loveliest medium of fortitude and gentleness. But he was obliged to acknowledge that only at Uppercross had he learned to do her justice, and only at Lyme had he begun to understand himself. At Lyme he had received lessons of more than one sort. The passing admiration of Mr. Elliot had at last roused him, and the scenes on the Cobb and at Captain Harville's had fixed her superiority. In his preceding attempts to attach himself to Louisa Musgrove, the attempts of angry pride, he protested that he had forever felt it to be impossible, that he had not cared, could not care for Louisa, though till that day, till the leisure for reflection which followed it, he had not understood the perfect excellence of the mind with which Louisa's could so ill bear comparison, or the perfect unrivalled hold it possessed over his own.
There he had learned to distinguish between the steadiness of principle and the obstinacy of self-will, between the darings of heedlessness and the resolution of a collected mind. There he had seen everything to exalt in his estimation the woman he had lost, and there begun to deplore the pride, the folly, and the madness of resentment which had kept him from trying to regain her when thrown in his way. From that period his penance had become severe. He had no sooner been free from the horror and remorse attending the first few days of Louisa's accident, no sooner begun to feel himself alive again, than he had begun to feel himself, though alive, not at liberty. I found, said he, that I was considered by Harville an engaged man, that neither Harville nor his wife entertained a doubt of our mutual attachment, that I was startled and shocked. To a degree I could contradict this instantly, but when I began to reflect that others might have felt the same, her own family, nay, perhaps herself, I was no longer at my own disposal. I was hers in honor if she wished it. I had been unguarded. I had not thought seriously on the subject before. I had not considered that my excessive intimacy must have its danger of ill consequence in many ways, and that I had no right to be trying whether I could attach myself to either of the girls, at risk of raising even an unpleasant report, were there no other ill effects. I had been grossly wrong, and must abide by the consequences. He found too late, in short, that he had entangled himself, and that precisely as he became fully satisfied of his not caring for Louisa at all, he must regard himself as bound to her, if her sentiments for him were what the Harvilles supposed. I determined him to leave Lyme, and await her complete recovery elsewhere. He would hardly weaken by any fair means whatever feelings or speculations concerning him might exist. No, he would gladly weaken by any fair means whatever feelings or speculations concerning him might exist, and he went therefore to his brother's, meaning after a while to return to Kellynch and act as circumstances might require. I was 6 weeks with Edward, said he, and saw him happy. I could have no other pleasure. I deserved none. He inquired after you very particularly, as even if you were personally altered, little suspecting that to my eye you could never alter. Ha 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 ha. Anne smiled. I beg to differ. You said something very cruel, Wentworth, and we will not forget. Anne smiled and let it pass. He had told Louisa when she asked him if she found her changed after 8 years. He said that Anne was so altered that he would not have recognized her. Yeah, the jerky face. Yeah, right now he's lying to her face, but Anne is just letting it go. It was too pleasing a blunder for a reproach. It is something for a woman to be assured in her 28th year that she has not lost one charm of earlier youth. But the value of such homage was inexpressibly increased to Anne by comparing it with former words, and feeling to be the result, not the cause, of a revival of his warm attachment. He had remained in Shropshire, lamenting the blindness of his own pride, and the blunders of his own calculations, till, at once released from Louisa by the astonishing and felicitous intelligence of her engagement with Benwick. Here, said he, ended the worst of my state, for now I could at least put myself in the way of happiness. I could exert myself, I could do something, but to be waiting so long in inaction, and waiting only for evil, had been dreadful. Within the first 5 minutes I said, I will be at Bath on Wednesday, and I was. Was it unpardonable to think it worth my while to come, and to arrive with some degree of hope? You were single. It was possible that you might retain the feelings of the past, as I did, and one encouragement happened to be mine. I could never doubt that you would be loved and sought by others, but I knew to a certainty that you had refused one man, at least, of better pretensions than myself, and I could not help often saying, was this for me? Because remember, Louisa told Wentworth that her brother Charles wanted to marry Anne, and she turned him down. So when he heard that, he what he thought inside was, Charles Musgrove has way better prospects than I had when I was younger. Does that mean that she turned him down? Not because, even though he had the material possessions and whatever, she turned him down because she still has feelings for me? Reading Wentworth makes my, like, because I have to go low, I have to hydrate a little more. So, yeah. The first meeting in Milsom Street afforded much to be said, but the concert still more. That evening seemed to be made up of exquisite moments. The moment of her stepping forward in the octagon room to speak to him, the moment of Mr. Elliot's appearing and tearing her away, and one or two subsequent moments, marked by returning hope or increasing despondency, were dwelt on with energy. "To see you," said he, "in the midst of those who would not be my well-wishers, to see your cousin close by you, conversing and smiling, and feel all the horrible eligibilities and proprieties of the match, to consider it as the certain wish of every being could hope to influence you, even if your feelings were reluctant or indifferent, to consider what powerful supports would be his. Was it not long enough to make the fool of me which I appeared? No, was it not enough to make the fool of me which I appeared? How could I look on without agony? Was not the very sight of the friend who sat behind you, was not the recollection of what had been, the knowledge of her influence, that is Mrs. Lady Russell, the indelible, immovable impression of what persuasion had once done, was it not all against me?" "You should have distinguished," replied Anne. "You should not have suspected me now. The case so different, and my age so different. If I was wrong in yielding to persuasion once, remember that it was to persuasion exerted on the side of safety, not of risk. When I yielded, I thought it was my duty, but no duty could be called in aid here. In marrying a man indifferent to me, all risk would have been incurred, and all duty violated." "Perhaps I ought to have reasoned thus," he replied, "but I could not. I could not derive benefit from the late knowledge I had acquired of your character. I could not bring it into play. It was overwhelmed, buried, lost in those earlier feelings which I had been smarting under year after year. I could think of you only as one who had yielded, who had given me up, who had been influenced by anyone rather than me. I saw you with the very person who had guided you in that year of misery. I had no reason to believe her of less authority now. The force of habit was to be added." "I should have thought," said Anne, "that my manner to yourself might have spared you much, or all of this." "No, no. Your manner might be only the ease which your engagement to another man would give. I left you in disbelief, and yet I was determined to see you again. My spirits rallied with the morning, and I felt that I still had a motive for remaining here." At last Anne was at home again, and happier than anyone in that house could have conceived. All the surprise and suspense, and every other painful part of the morning dissipated by this conversation. She re-entered the house so happy as to be obliged to find an alloy in some momentary apprehensions of its being impossible to last. An interval of meditation, serious and grateful, was the best corrective for everything dangerous in such high-wrought felicity, and she went to her room and grew steadfast and fearless in the thankfulness of her enjoyment. Ah, Anne never changed. She is such a beautiful introvert. she needs her alone time to process. Ah, she's such a darling woman after my own heart. The evening came. The drawing rooms were lighted up. The company assembled. It was but a card party. It was but a mixture of those who had never met before and those who met too often. A commonplace business, too numerous for intimacy, too small for variety. But Anne had never found an evening shorter. Glowing and lovely in sensibility and happiness, and more generally admired than she thought about or cared for. She had cheerful or forbearing feelings for every creature around her. Mr. Elliot was there. She avoided, but she could pity him. The Wallaces, she had amusement in understanding them. Lady Dalrymple and Miss Carteret. they would soon be innocuous cousins to her. She cared not for Mrs. Clay, and had nothing to blush for in the public manners of her father and sister. With the Musgroves there was the happy chat of perfect ease, with Captain Harville the kind-hearted intercourse of brother and sister, with Lady Russell attempts at conversation which a delicious consciousness cut short, with Admiral and Mrs. Croft everything of peculiar cordiality and fervent interest, which the same consciousness sought to conceal, and with Captain Wentworth some moments of communications continually occurring, and always the hope of more, and always the knowledge of his being there. It was in one of these short meetings, each apparently occupied in admiring a fine display of greenhouse plants, that she said, "I have been thinking over the past, and trying impartially to judge the right and the wrong. I mean, with regard to myself. And I must believe that I was right, much as I suffered from it. That I was perfectly right in being guided by the friend whom you will love better than you do now. To me she was in the place of a parent. Do not mistake me, however. I am not saying that she did not err in her advice. It was perhaps one of those cases in which advice is good or bad only as the event decides. As for myself, I certainly never should, in any circumstance of tolerable similarity, give such advice. But I mean that I was right in submitting to her, and that if I had done otherwise, I should have suffered more in continuing the engagement than I did even in giving it up, because I should have suffered in my conscience. I have now, as far as such a sentiment is allowable in human nature, nothing to reproach myself with, and if I mistake not, a strong sense of duty is no bad part of a woman's portion." He looked at her, he looked at Lady Russell, and looking again at her, replied as if in cool deliberation, "Not yet. But there are hopes of her being forgiven in time. I trust to being in charity with her soon. But I too have been thinking over the past, and a question has suggested itself, whether there may not have been one person more my enemy even than that lady, my own self. Tell me, if, when I returned to England in the year 1808, with a few £1,000, and was posted unto the Laconia, if I had then written to you, would you have answered my letter? Would you in short have renewed the engagement then?" "Would I?" was all her answer, but the accent was decisive enough. "Good God, you would! It is not that I did not think of it, or desire it, as what could alone crown all my other successes. But I was proud, too proud to ask again. I did not understand you. I shut my eyes and would not understand you or do you justice. This is a recollection which ought to make me forgive everyone sooner than myself. 6 years of separation and suffering might have been spared. It is a sort of pain, too, which is new to me. I have been used to the gratification of believing myself to earn every blessing that I enjoyed. I have valued myself on honorable toils and just rewards. Like other great men under my reverses, he added with a smile, I must endeavor to subdue my mind to my fortune. I must learn to brook being happier than I deserve. End of chapter. Wow, so much happening, you guys, in this one chapter. Oh my gosh. So lots of stuff to mull over here. So we got the letter. We did get the letter from these two, from Wentworth. It's one of my favorite letters in all literature. No, I have not quite memorized it, but it's a classic. You pierce my soul. I am half agony, half hope. Dudes and dudettes and whatever. If you ever want to woo somebody, write them a love letter written in your own hand and take some lessons from Captain Wentworth. I guarantee that it will do something. I don't know, I'm just a silly romantic, okay, so probably take my advice with a grain of salt. But yeah, that letter was beautiful and heartfelt and passionate and loving, And poor Anne, she just wanted to go run after him. And she did. She went to go get her man. I'm glad that they finally got their heads out of their butts and finally talked things out. And they both had to think about their behavior in the past. They both made mistakes, not just Anne in giving him up, but also in Wentworth being too proud to have tried again. It says here, like, 2 years after they left, their engagement was broken in 1806. He went off to sea in the Asp. He got some money. He got a new ship as a captain, so he rose in rank. He had his own ship. That means he could do even more deeds of daring do. So he's like, okay, when I got my new ship and I had a few $1,000s, I had earned a little bit of a fortune. If I had written to you to reconsider, would you have? And she's like, of course I would have. And he's like, oh my gosh, and it's been 6 years since then. And we could have had all this time together, but we didn't because I was too proud to write to you. Oh, you guys, there's nothing as terrible and as destructive to potential happiness as pride. In this book, I kind of identify with Wentworth. I'm a little bit of a Wentworth. I wish I could say I identify with Anne, but that would be like too much to hope for. I identify myself with Wentworth, and it really has the whole conclusion that he has here. It's like something that I like, yo, yeah, I agree with his conclusion. This is the lesson that he learned is the lesson that I must learn. Again, he is very active. He is very accomplished. Many of the things that he has, he thinks that he earned it himself. So that makes him proud in his own might, his own abilities. But he has to learn that, he has to be a little bit more humble. And now he has to also be content with being happier than he deserved, because Anne could have so easily married Charles. She had her chances. It wasn't that she didn't have a chance to get married. She had a chance. But if she had said yes to Charles Musgrove, he would have returned and still had a thing for him, and then learned that it was too late, and then he would have been suffered. As it was, though, he is lucky, and he is luckier than he deserves by having been away so long and returned to find her still the same, and even still the same woman that he left behind, somebody he really respects, somebody he really admires, and she's not married, and she's still single, and she still loves him. That is a huge blessing, and he has to say, like, I must learn to be conscious of the fact that what I have is more than I deserve. Oh yeah. Ooh, I see. There's a chat going on with book recommendations. There's talk of Tolkien. Oh, Red Tempest says it's from a book. Okay. What? Okay, so the passage you wrote in there, you didn't write it. You didn't get it from ChatGPT. You got it from Tolkien. Nice. I actually have to. Okay, here's the confession, you guys. I have not read Tolkien. I have not read Lord of the Rings. I have not even watched the movies, you guys. So, yeah. But I hear they're amazing books. So thank you for sharing. I see Red Tempest keeping up the poor and count. Time Lord Boys agrees. Men have been in charge of old writing for sure. So exactly. So when she's talking with Harville, he's like, yeah, you, like, even the books say that women are the ones that are like fickle and they change. But then again, remember, men were the ones that were the authors of the day. Women were not expected. It was very rare for a lady author to come up and write a book that would sell everywhere. Because, of course, being a woman, There were many limits as to what she could do, what she could write about. Again, it was a very rough time to be a woman in the 1800s, you guys. There's a point. Like you can't use books to make an argument. This Juliana Morelli says, "Hello, by the way. This scene on the show was agonizing. Poor Anne running like a maniac." Yes. Okay, so if you guys want to join me for the 2006 screening, it's going to be on Sunday noon Pacific time. So if you do your mental calculations, should be late evening for Europe gang and the middle of the night for Southeast Asia gang. Sorry, you guys. It's a good one. But yes, when Anne is trying to chase or hunt down Wentworth, it's they really did play up the anxiety of finding him. She was really like a maniac. All right. Time Lord Boy asks, got any Italian books you would recommend, Juliana? Ooh, and Juliana recommends some books here. Il Nome della Rosa. Did I say that right? No, I rolled my R like a Spanish speaker. Il Nome della Rosa. Is that how you say it? I did the hand. Yes, I did the hand. And I'm sorry if it offends you, but that's the best way I can get out the Italians. Anyway, El Nome della Rosa, The Name of the Rose. Haven't heard of it. Neither has Time Lord Boy, but we can check him out. Juliana does say it's a classic too. Ooh. Okay. Juliana also says, I love that letter too. You're not alone in the swooning. Oh, thank goodness. Let us all swoon. Where are our smelling salts? Yeah, I need some smelling salts for all these like romantic passages. Actually, you know what, you guys? I have to admit, the angst. I love a good angst, and I love a good, triumphant end after many trials and tribulations. So, if you join me for A World Away, you might notice that my writing style kinda is influenced by several people, including, of course, I will not deny it, my writing style was heavily influenced by Ellen Montgomery. Because I read all her books multiple times, one of my favorite authors, as well as Jane Austen and many other like romance writers. It's just so choice. The struggles and then the triumph of love. It's so good, you guys. It's so good. All right. Time Lord Boy says, I think we need a jar for every time a person says poor Anne. At least we're not making this into a drinking game. Crusher says, the other day I saw at the bookstore a new version of this book with letters added to the story, written by Anne and Wentworth. What? That's insane. Same book, but with detachable letters. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. That is so cool. Oh, that's so cool. I wish I could see that. Red Tempest says we should have Magpie watch Lord of the Rings movies on Discord one day. We should. I have not watched any of that. I was thinking maybe I would save them for like maybe do. Okay, so I have okay, you guys. I have my regular channel, the Chattering Magpie. I have the Chattering Magpie reads, and then I'm planning on doing a reactions channel. So I'm trying to save some movies for when I actually do finish the MCU. I've watched the first 3 phases of the MCU. Once they're edited, I will do more movies or shows or whatever. So I'm trying to save some shows and some movies, including the Lord of the Rings saga, which I know is supreme and excellent, but I have kept from not watching that. There's other shows that I want to also watch and react to, like Full Metal Alchemist. I also want to watch that. It's in my to watch list. I should have probably waited for Haikyuu, but I really liked it. I watched the first episode and I was like, I'm just gonna watch the whole thing. So anyway, so there's a lot of anime that I wanna just wait for it before I. So it's gonna happen sooner or later, you guys. But yeah, if you guys want to watch it on Discord, by all means watch it. I just probably will not. Now, reading Tolkien though, I might not read Tolkien. He's a very dense kind of author. Mad respects to his writing style and his ethics as a writer and his devotion to his craft. But I don't see myself reading Lord of the Rings. I actually did check out the book when I was in high school, but I couldn't get through it. I couldn't get through the first couple of chapters, and I forgot what I read anyway. I mean, compared to the fact that I read at least 3 books by Charles Darwin, Charles Dickens. Okay, so I actually read Charles Dickens, and he is also very difficult to read. In fact, I would think he's probably more difficult, but I just powered through Charles Dickens, and I was not able to power through Tolkien. I don't know. However, Tolkien did have a friend, C.S. Lewis, and I love C.S. Lewis's works. Not just the children's version, but the Christian works, his essays. Very insightful things. Of course, if you're a Christian, you will have heard of his books. Chronicles of Narnia, those were some of the first books I ever read after learning English. So again, very dear and near to my heart. All right, let's see. What do you know, says Little Butterfly? Mary saved the day by marrying Charles. Yeah, and you know, like I would honestly hate to be a couple that's constantly bickering, constantly not like trying to like. It's a house where there's no real peace, you guys. But they are funny together. Charles is bickering, like poking fun at her, and she's taking things way too seriously and herself too seriously. So he's having fun at her expense. Kind of wish that they both were happier, but they're getting along just fine. So if they're fine, we're fine. It's not ideal, but they're doing just fine together. Let's see. I'm not sure which one is the one about monks in a monastery solving murders, Tamlord Boy. Please tell me the title of that work. Juliana Morelli agrees with me. A little angst gives the best spice. Oh, yes, yes. Also, Red Temple says we would be drunk halfway through if we did a drinking game and read-alongs. Right. Red Tempest has a lot of movie recommendations, but oh, and also says Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood was a good anime. Yeah, I'm gonna watch it soon, one day, eventually. So yeah, one day. Crusher though is crying in shock that I haven't watched it. Juliana agrees with me. Haikyuu is so good. It is so good, you guys. It's so good that I finished watching all of the seasons. I haven't watched the movies and OVAs because they're kind of just like repeats of what happened. They're like summaries of the season. So I'm like, I'll wait for that later. But I am waiting for the movie that came out on May 31st, which was the Battle of the Dumpster. So again, no spoilers, but I'm so looking forward to it. I'm looking at the Reddit post to see when it comes out, if Crunchyroll will release it, and if so, when. So I'm so looking forward to that one. But meanwhile, I actually started reading the manga yesterday, you guys. I started reading the manga. I am in chapter, let me see. I have it in my phone right here. Easy. Okay, I'm at chapter 3. The chapter called Single-Celled Organisms. And honestly, guys, the manga is hilarious. The faces, the faces on the anime are so funny. But in the manga, they just seem so... It's a really good manga, so read it. I've read, 3 chapters, and I love it already. Let's see. Noodle Something's Kimchi hasn't watched Full Metal Alchemist either. Ooh, see, it's not as ubiquitous as you think. By the way, I actually do have a bone to pick with that fandom. The FMAB whatever fandom, they're so annoying, you guys. They're so annoying. Because they want to make sure that Full Metal Alchemist remains on top of the MAL ratings list. They will go and give bad reviews to any anime that just dares to surpass Full Metal Alchemist. Like, dude, if you're confident in the fact that your anime is the best, then stop doing that crap. Like, it's gonna everything's gonna balance out. You don't have to do that junk. So I don't know. That's just annoying because you guys, when the reboot of Fruits Basket came out, the final season, people loved it, and I loved it. I remember crying profusely. And then I went to MAL, I was gonna put my 10-star review. And I saw so many people putting horrible rating system. I was like, I'm so angry. And then I found out again that it was the MAL, the Full Metal Alchemist bros who weren't doing that. Now, that's what people say, and that's not the first time I heard that said. But yeah, that's something that pisses me off. Anyway, Noodle Something's Kimchi says Haikyuu is great to watch while on the treadmill, and you know what? Also, the soundtrack is so good. It's so good. I've been going out running more often, and I'm actually trying to cut down rather than running for an hour in a flat surface, because I have so much stuff to do and I want to just cut my workout in half. I actually just go to the park and find the steepest hill and then just go run up and down and up and down and up and it does work. It does cut the exercise time in half. But in the morning, to psych myself up, in the mornings, I'm not a morning person, you guys. In the mornings, I put on my Spotify playlist, and it's my Haikyuu Spotify playlist, and boy, does it work to hype myself up when I need a little extra boost. Let's see. Haikyuu, yes. Red Tempest says, did you at least watch the Narnia movies, Magpie? I watched the first one. I didn't finish the Caspian one. And I started The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, but I didn't finish it either. But I did watch the first one. Okay, so at least give me that. Actually, I am waiting for... Netflix is going to release the Narnia. So, and I hope that they do it justice. So I know it's not going to be perfect because, it's a different time in our world than it was back then. But my favorite of all of the Narnia books is The Horse and His Boy. And I know it's going to be problematic, and I know it's going to be, but I hope that at least they retain some of the wonder of that adventure story. It was by far my favorite of all of the Narnia books. It was The Horse and His Boy. It was just a story about a boy and his horse. I mean, its title is self-explanatory. And just going out to save Narnia, and I loved it. I loved it so much. A different culture, different people, different environments other than forest fairies and stuff like that. And then, of course, that was the first book that I actually started making soundtracks for. If you guys don't know this, I have a thing about making soundtracks for books. I have a thing for making soundtracks for anything that I read. I usually like to do soundtracks for. Not make the music myself, but put together playlists of music that has been done before. So I made a playlist of Whenever I read The Horse and His Boy, I hear the music in my head, and whenever I hear the music, I remember The Horse and His Boy. So yeah. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the Netflix adaptation because I think The Horse and His Boy was super cute, and also I also really loved, because it was hilarious, freaking hilarious, The Magician's Nephew. Oh man, my sister and I both like devoured those books because again, we're not English native English speakers, so we started reading those books to help our English, and yeah, very, very, very excellent books. And yeah, Magician's Nephew, one of my favorites as well. Juliana says, The Lord of the Rings is my favorite thing in the world, but yes, the first chapters are a chore. Oh, are you meaning to say that I should just power through? The whole Tom Bombadil part is a slog for me, and I always skip on rereads. Oh, I should have known. I should have known that it's kind of like a Blue Castle situation where the first 3 chapters, I'm like, oh my gosh, come on. Valency, you can do this. Noodle Something's Kimchi says Laid Back Camp is my favorite anime, and I have not watched it yet. I should put it on my to watch list. Is it on Crunchyroll? Pulling up my phone. Laid Back. Oh, there it is. Ooh, 5 seasons. Oh, that's fun. Let me add it to my watch list. Okay, I have added it. Because I trust Noodle Dumplings Kimchi's taste. I shall probably watch it maybe in the Discord server. I don't know. Alright, and let's see. Gosh, so many comments, and we still haven't finished the book, you guys. Oh, The Name of the Rose is the one about the monks, Juliana. Okay. Red Temple says, I never saw Haikyuu anime. You never watched it. You never watched it. Ah, it's so good though. I must admit, I didn't watch it until the Olympics came out. I was going through Twitter, and they said Japan won against Argentina, and the moment that they won, they played the Haikyuu song, the theme song for the first season. And people that are, weebs, they started crying. So I was like, really? Is it that impactful? So I was like, okay, I'm going to go just check out the first episode, see what this is all about. And yes, I got hooked. 1 episode, and I had to watch them all, you guys. So yeah, I watched them all. It took me about a week. This time last week, I had not really watched Haikyuu, and now I am a fan. Juliana Moralisa asks, did you watch Frieren? I did watch Frieren. I really liked it. Again, it's not one that I would binge, but it's very beautiful, very superbly done. Crusher says, wow, Magpie, your views are now consistently in the double digits. Thank you very much for joining me. Remember me when you hit the triple digits. I don't know what I have to do to hit the triple digits, you guys. What do I have to do to hit the triple digits, you guys? What do I have to do to get 1,000 subscribers in this channel, you guys? I am actually asking for ideas. All right. Full Metal Alchemist agrees, Juliana Morelli, is a little insufferable. It is an amazing saga, but man, there are other tastes for other stories. Yeah, exactly. I think I'm just a little spoiled because I think the bookworm fandom is one of the sweetest, nicest, wholesomest fandoms I've ever been. Not that I've been in many, but they're really, like, there's other fandoms, but they're just not as engaged as the bookworm fandom, which makes it not be so toxic. But when there's a lot of interaction and action and discussion in a particular work, it lends itself to some toxicity of some kind, of some degree. But bookworm their communities are very engaging, and I haven't seen any toxicity except 1 or 2 times when I got a few comments on my channel that were actually really offensive. Like, somebody called me really offensive names. But that's an outlier, and I think that's just some psycho person. So I went like, I'm gonna delete your comment and I'm gonna block your ass. And I did, and that was the end of that. And now, other than that, we're good. All right, so let's just finish this. Red Tempest says, I give you 1 gold sticker for at least watching 1 Narnia movie. Okay, Red, you know where to spam me. You got you got my mailing address. Send me my sticker. I demand my sticker. Though I do agree with Tam Lord Boy says, let's hope Netflix does not ruin Narnia. I know, especially since you're from that side of the world, you have a special vested interest in it. Alright, you guys, let's do this. There's a whole bunch of other comments I want to get to, but I want to finish today's read along and then have a little time for work so that we can watch the movie at night. So let's do this, you guys. A few more chapters, 2 more chapters. They're fairly short. Yeah, they're super short, so we're almost done, you guys. Let's do this. Persuasion. Who can be in doubt of what followed? When any 2 young people take it into their heads to marry, they are pretty sure by perseverance to carry their point, be they ever so poor, or ever so imprudent, or ever so little likely to be necessary to each other's ultimate comfort. This may be bad morality to conclude with, but I believe it to be the truth. And if such parties succeed, how should a Captain Wentworth and an Anne Elliot, with the advantage of maturity of mind, consciousness of right, and 1 independent fortune between them, fail of bearing down every opposition? They might, in fact, have borne down a great deal more than they met with, for there was little to distress them beyond the want of graciousness and warmth. Sir Walter made no objection, and Elizabeth did nothing worse than look cold and unconcerned. Captain Wentworth, with £25,000, and as high in his profession as merit and activity could place him, was no longer nobody. He was now esteemed quite worthy to address the daughter of a foolish spendthrift baronet who had not had the principle or sense enough to maintain himself in the situation in which Providence had placed him, who could give his daughter at present but a small part of the share of £10,000 which must be hers hereafter. Sir Walter, indeed, though he had no affection for Anne, had no vanity flattered, to make him really happy on the occasion, was very far from thinking it a bad match for her. On the contrary, when he saw more of Captain Wentworth, saw him repeatedly by daylight, and eyed him well, he was very much struck by his personal claims, and felt that his superiority of appearance might be not unfairly balanced against her superiority of rank. And all this, assisted by his well-sounding name, enabled Sir Walter at last to prepare his pen with a very good grace for the insertion of the marriage in the volume of honor. Sir Walter! Remember, the book started with Sir Walter loving nothing more than reading about himself in the book of the peerage, where they list families of the nobility. So this is like the greatest gift and the greatest honor he can bestow, is to put his daughter Anne's marriage into that volume. Oh, my dear. Oh. All right. The only one among them whose supposition of feeling could excite any serious anxiety was Lady Russell. Anne knew that Lady Russell must be suffering some pain in understanding and relinquishing Mr. Elliot, and be making some struggles to become truly acquainted with and do justice to Captain Wentworth. This, however, was what Lady Russell had now to do. She must learn to feel that she had been mistaken with regard to both, that she had been unfairly influenced by appearances in each, that because Captain Wentworth's manners had not suited her own ideas, she had been too quick in suspecting them to indicate a character of dangerous impetuosity, and that because Mr. Elliot's manners had precisely pleased her in their propriety and correctness, their general politeness and suavity, she had been too quick in receiving them as the certain result of the most correct opinions and well-regulated mind. There was nothing less for Lady Russell to do than to admit that she had been pretty completely wrong, and to take up a new set of opinions and hopes. There is a quickness of perception in some, a nicety in the discernment of character, a natural penetration, in short, which no experience in others can equal. And Lady Russell had been less gifted in this part of understanding than her young friend. But she was a very good woman, and if her second object was to be sensible and well-judging, her first was to see Anne happy. She loved Anne better than she loved her own abilities, and when the awkwardness of the meeting was over, she found little hardship in attaching herself as a mother to the man who was securing the happiness of her other child. Of all the family, Mary was probably the most immediately gratified by the circumstance. Mary! Ah, it was creditable to have a sister married, and she might flatter herself with having been greatly instrumental to the connection by keeping Anne with her in the autumn, and as her own sister must be better than her husband's sisters, it was very agreeable that Captain Wentworth should be a richer man than either Captain Benwick or Charles Hayter. She had something to suffer, perhaps, when they came into contact again, in seeing Anne restored to the rights of seniority and the mistress of a very pretty landaulet. Oh, landaulet. That's like a little carriage. But she had a future to look forward to, of powerful consolation. Anne had no upper crust hall before her, no landed estate, no headship of a family, and if they could but keep Captain Wentworth from being made a baronet, she would not change situations with Anne. Mary never changes, and, well, for better or worse, we love her. It would be well for the elder sister if she were equally satisfied with her situation, for a change is not very probable there. She had soon the mortification of seeing Mr. Elliot withdraw, and no one of proper condition has since presented himself to raise even the unfounded hopes which sunk with him. The news of his cousin's engagement burst on Mr. Elliot most unexpectedly. It deranged his best plan of domestic happiness, his best hope of keeping Sir Walter single by the watchfulness which a son-in-law's rights would have given. But, though discomfited and disappointed, he could still do something for his own interest and his own enjoyment. He soon quitted Bath, and on Mrs. Clay's quitting it soon afterwards, and being next heard of as established under his protection in London, it was evident how double a game he had been playing, and how determined he was to save himself from being cut out by one artful woman, at least. Mrs. Clay's affections had overpowered her interest, and she had sacrificed, for the young man's sake, the possibility of scheming longer for Sir Walter. She has abilities, however, as well as affections, and it is now a doubtful point whether his cunning or hers may finally carry the day, whether after preventing her from being the wife of Sir Walter, he may not be wheedled and caressed at last into making her the wife of Sir William. It cannot be doubted that Sir Walter and Elizabeth were shocked and mortified by the loss of their companion and the discovery of their deception in her. But they had their cousins, to be sure, to resort to for comfort. But they must long feel that to flatter and follow others, without being flattered and followed in turn, is but a state of half-enjoyment. And, satisfied at a very early period of Lady Russell's meaning to love Captain Wentworth as she ought, had no other alloy to the happiness of her prospects than what arose from the consciousness of having no relations to bestow on him which a man of sense could value. There she felt her own inferiority keenly. The disproportion in their fortune was nothing. It did not give her a moment's regret. But to have no family to receive and estimate him properly, nothing of respectability, of harmony, of goodwill to offer in return for all the worth and all the prompt welcome which met her in his brothers and sisters, was a source of as lively pain as her mind could well be sensible of under the circumstances of otherwise strong felicity. She had but two friends in the world to add to his list, Lady Russell and Mrs. Smith. To those, however, he was very well disposed to attach himself. Lady Russell, in spite of all her former transgressions, he could now value from his heart. While he was not obliged to say that he believed her to have been right in originally dividing them, he was ready to say almost everything else in her favor. And as for Mrs. Smith, she had claims of various kinds to recommend her, quickly and permanently. Her recent good offices by Anne had been enough in themselves, and their marriage, instead of depriving her of one friend, secured her of two. She was their earliest visitor in their settled life, and Captain Wentworth, by putting her in the way of recovering her husband's property in the West Indies, by writing for her, acting for her, and seeing her through all the petty difficulties of the case, while the activity and exertions of with the activity and exertion of a fearless man and a determined friend, fully requited the services which she had rendered, or ever meant to render, to his wife. Aw, that's so sweet. So you guys remember that Mrs. Smith had some money, but there was some property that she could get money from, but she's too sick and it's so tedious and so much paperwork had to be done. She needed somebody's help. She was going to ask Mr. Elliot if Anne married him to help her, but of course that fell through when Anne ended up not marrying Elliot. But now that she married Wentworth, now Wentworth is the one that did all the paperwork and saw all the business for her that she couldn't do herself because she's so sick, and of course she doesn't have experience in that stuff. Blame the lack of education of the day. Anyway, so he did it, and he helped her to restore money so she wouldn't be so destitute, and that's really, really nice. Mrs. Smith's enjoyments were not spoiled by this improvement of income. With some improvement of health, and the acquisition of such friends to be often with, for her cheerfulness and mental alacrity did not fail her, and while these prime supplies of good remained, she might have bid defiance even to greater accessions of worldly prosperity. She might have been absolutely rich and perfectly healthy, and yet be happy. Her spring of felicity was in the glow of her spirits, as her friend Anne's was in the warmth of her heart. Anne was tenderness itself, and she had the full worth of it in Captain Wentworth's affections. His profession was all that could ever make her friends wish that tenderness less, the dread of a future war, all that could dim her sunshine. She gloried in being a sailor's wife, but she must pay the tax of quick alarm for belonging to that profession which is, if possible, more distinguished in its domestic virtues than its national importance. The end. All right, you guys, that is finally the end of Persuasion. We got like everything, just kind of like a quick, not even an epilogue-ish, just like filling you in on details of what happened to the people. We got some surprises, you guys. Did you guys see that coming? Elliot and Mrs. Clay? Dude. Dude. So now we know what Mr. Elliot and Mrs. Clay were talking about when Mrs. Clay lied and said she hadn't seen him. They're probably setting up a rendezvous or for some kind of assignation. All right. Talk about YouTube drama that'll make you grow. Ha ha ha, but really nothing gets more views than drama, says Juliana Morelli. You know what? I guess it could talk about drama and stuff. But it wouldn't be a Reed's book. I mean, a Reed's channel. It would just be like, the chattering magpie spills the tea or something like that. Tea time with the chattering magpie. I could do that. That's an interesting idea. Crusher is leaving. Bye-bye, Crusher. Hope you have a good rest of your day. Red Tempest says, do you want a gold sticker or Ferdinand sticker? LOL. I already got a Ferdinand sticker. Alos was kind enough to send me a sticker, but if you want to send another one, sure, send it. Send it this way. Stop it. Noodle, something's kimchi. How dare you? That's, well, never mind. I know, Juliana Morelli says, oh, Mary, bless her heart. I know. Um, she's true to herself to the very end, and I wish her all the happiness. Honestly, it was all in all a happy ending. People got what they deserved. Honestly, they did get what they deserved. Elliot, Mrs. Clay, somebody who is as scheming and duplicitous as he is, and she, somebody as cold and calculating as he is. And like the book says, it's not outside the realm of possibility that in him trying to make her not marry Sir Walter, she will actually end up married to him. He will end up marrying her. So we'll see. They deserve each other. They do. Yeah, Juliana says, I love that we get a happy ending, and about the drama stuff, don't do it. It's a joke. Ha ha ha. Hi. I am soliciting ideas. I have to consider them all. Time Lord Boy says good night and God bless Magpie. Good night, darling. I'll see you hopefully on Friday when we start the new read along, or if not, on Sunday we're gonna be watching the adaptation for this one. It's on my Discord server, but I put the invitation out for you guys on the description. You don't have to be a Ko-fi member to join me. You can just join me because you guys are my favorite bookworms and I love you all for joining me. So just drop on in if you're free. It's going to be at noon my time, probably like 9ish, 8ish your time. So if you're able to, drop on in. Everybody else here, I am going to end this soon. One day we'll have a chit chat, so don't forget. Don't just put Anne in the corner of your mind. We will revisit her. We will do a chit chat. I will put it here. But yeah, let me know your impressions about this book. Did you enjoy it? Was this your first Jane Austen book, novel? This is like a small taste of her writing style. Very different from Charlotte Bronte's writing style. Of course, different people, different eras. And I will let you guys know something. Here's a secret. Charlotte Bronte was not a fan of Jane Austen. You guys know that. She did not like her work. She did not like her writing. She was like, no, I don't like her writing. So that's pretty intense. Because you would think that somebody who was so influential in the genre of romance would have been an instant sell for anybody who valued that. But let us compare the writing styles between one and the other. In this one, it wasn't that bad. But if you ever read Pride and Prejudice, the part where the main leads finally get together and you feel like you were cheated because we don't get the dialogue. We just get a tell, don't show. We just get told that they made up and then they confess to each other feelings of love, but we don't get to see it. I'm like, I hate it. That's the only thing about Pride and Prejudice that I don't like. It's that we don't get to see that. Oh well. That's why we have all of those adaptations. We got 2005 Pride and Prejudice. We got 1995 Pride and Prejudice. They all fill in that void just perfectly. We will have one last pour and counting the chit chat, says Red Tempest. Yes, we will. We will. Theo points out Jane Austen has got some sass. She does have sass. It's like this quiet wit. It's quiet wit that it's just there, like a little smirk, but in writing. And this heroine was not really like smirky, but I think you can tell. I believe that the humor, the best expression of humor that Jane Austen has is seen in Pride and Prejudice. That's not to say, though, that Emma and Sense and Sensibility are not good ones. They're very good. I also really like Sense and Sensibility. it also has its moments. But yeah, I think of my favorite Jane Austen novels, the writing style, I think Persuasion and Pride and Prejudice are my favorite. Yeah. And of course, Tamla Boy says the Bronte sisters' books are more gothic, so it does not surprise me that, of course, they were not fans of Jane Austen, especially since Jane Austen, she made fun of the gothic genre when she wrote, I think, Northanger Abbey. I think it was her way of kind of like deriding the genre. And since they are, of course, the masters, the Bronte sisters, they love their gothic. They breathe gothic. I mean, if you thought Jane Eyre was gothic, you did not read the freaking Wuthering Heights or Tenant of Windfield Hall or Agnes Grey. All of that stuff, super gothic, you guys. Well, Agnes, maybe. Okay. Super gothic. So they probably were like, this woman has no taste. We eschew her writing. So yeah, it was all a matter of style. I personally enjoy both, except not Emily Bronte. I cannot get through Wuthering Heights. I know it's gothic, but I will not read it. Mm-hmm. Let's see. What? She disliked Jane Austen? Did she hate chick lit? Says Noodles on Please Game. Yes. She just didn't like her style. For Bronte, her style was a distillation of just internal passion and feeling and emotion, and she believed that everything had to have a meaning, and it was very lush writing about like descriptions of darkness and feelings and tumultuous and expressions of love. Like, she did not hold back. Like, compare Wentworth confessing his love, which he did very admirable, but in a letter. But the dialogue was kind of like a little more subdued compared to Rochester, where he is absolutely out of his mind, in love, pouring out his heart, giving it to Jane, begging her not to leave him, doing everything he possibly can, even resorting to almost violence. Yes, he almost did, just so she would not leave him. So, I mean, it's just like, couldn't compare. Totally different writing styles. And so I bet they were like, that's too tame for us. Agnes Grey for Halloween. I was thinking of doing another one for what was it? For October, but I forgot. Oh yes, for October we're gonna read selected short stories of Edgar Allan Poe. That's gonna be our October read. If we have finished A World Away. Otherwise, we'll just save the selected works of Edgar Allan Poe. Yes, I am a fan. Yes, I know I said I don't like the occult, I don't like horror, I don't like that stuff. But when I discovered those books, again, it was just a different time in my life, and I was a sixth grader, and I was like, this is amazing, this is great, and I devoured them, and I still enjoy them. So all right, everybody, it seems that we have been at this live for quite a bit of time. I've had so much fun, you guys, so much fun hanging out with you guys. I hope you are not too tired of your magpie to join her for some watch parties. We are going to have a watch party on Discord, like I said before. Click on the invitation links on the description so you can join me. It's going to start, I'm going to try to start as punctually as possible. So at 4 o'clock Pacific. So in about 4 hours. Ugh. Oh my gosh, I have to get to work. You guys, I gotta go work. I have some stuff to do. But I will be seeing you guys later. Thank you for joining me. And again, if you want to support this magpie, please consider joining my Ko-fi, or if not, just, go and go and support by go and support me by dropping off a donation on my Ko-fi. I'm putting my page on the chat. This, as you guys know, this channel does not monetize since we are only 150 bookworms here. So I mean, this is just like for funsies. But I probably should be spending more time doing content for the other channel, which does monetize or whatnot. But I don't care. I'm having fun. I'm enjoying this. So unless one day I'm like, you guys, like I can't pay the rent. I have to take on a second job. I'm gonna have to put this channel in pause. I'm still gonna be reading you guys. So whether we monetize or not, don't worry. I'm still here. But of course, donations are always accepted. All right, you guys, I'll see you later. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day if you don't join me for the watch parties in the afternoon. Until Friday when we start reading A World Away. I'll see you guys later. Thank you for joining me. Bye-bye.